Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the EOcafe, the place where the EO community meet. Good to see you here. Yeah, there's more people coming along, so that's good. So EOcafe, I think everyone's familiar with the rules now, but let me just repeat them for the sake of it. Please keep your microphones off unless I ask you to speak. You're very welcome to keep your cameras on. It's always nice to see people and to interact with them. So please, if you feel able to, put your camera on and put any questions you have into the chat so that Paul and I can see them, and we can plan to introduce them into the conversation when the time is right. So again, we'll start off with I'll have a talk with Paul about the role of the organization, about the role of Eumetsat and how industry can get more involved. And then maybe 35 minutes in, we'll take questions that you have, and it's great if other people can join the conversation. As we said, the idea of the EOcafe is that Paul and I have a conversation which you can listen into, and then join in later as you wish. So that's basically it. So our guest today is Paul Cunet. Paul is Head of Strategy, Communication and International Relations at Eumetsat, the European Organization for the Exploitation of Meteorological Satellites. Paul is also Chef de Cabinet to the DG. So before we start talking about Eumetsat and what it's doing, Paul, just tell us a little about yourself and how you ended up in the role of Head of Strategy, etc. at Eumetsat.
You won't have enough with 35 minutes, I so
No, well, keep it quick.
But first of all, so good afternoon to everybody, and thank you, Jeff and the HIRSC team for giving us the opportunity to have this conversation this afternoon. And so how I came in Eumetsat, everything started from Brussels, because I am from Brussels, so I was not far away from you. And after a few years in academia and in Brussels in private company, who was dealing with application of Earth observation data, I moved in '98 to Eumetsat. First dealing with international affairs, lots of projects in Africa, so we might talk about it later on, but we are doing quite a lot for Africa. And then I wanted to come back to Brussels, so I came back for 3 years in the European Commission at a very exciting time where we were trying to set up a space policy for Europe, which was killed by the vote in France. So. And it's only after 3 years back in Brussels that I reapplied for a position in Eumetsat and came back. So that's a bit my parcours.
And I thought you were from Liège rather than Brussels.
My parents, but when I left Belgium, I was living Chaussée de Waterloo. You see, it's not far away from.
No, it's not so far from me. No. Okay. So Eumetsat, founded in 1986, 30 European states are members, and whose representatives make up your governing council, which is the top decision-making body. You're operator of European meteorological satellites, and you're also an entrusted entity in the Copernicus program. You operate 2 of the Sentinel satellites and exploit data from 2 more. You work very closely with ESA for developing the space segment, and ECMWF for both meteorological data and also for climate monitoring. And you're now operating one of the DIAS. I think these are all topics that we'll come on to as we discuss through, but maybe a very simple introduction. Maybe you can fill in some of the gaps in the Eumetsat role in this complex EO sector.
So really the purpose of the organization is really to operationally deliver meteorological observation from space, primarily to the national weather services of our member states. So these are our clients, and they are paying for the organization, and these are our main clients. But of course, in meteorology, we have a data policy which is quite open. So interacting with many other users and making the data available to many other users is really something important to us. The organization is user-driven. This is very important. So we are constantly evolving and changing our system to make sure that weather forecasters get the data they need on time with the level of quality, the timeliness they need. And we are operational, so we have really a commitment to deliver the data. To give you an idea, the type of SLA that we have with our member states is that the data should be available more than 99.5% of the time over the year, which means that we cannot miss delivering a data to a user. And this is why in planning for our system, we have a lot of redundancy. We have spare satellites in orbit. We have several receiving stations, several communication ways of bringing the data to Eumetsat. So it's really a system which is planned to be operational and to be also flexible, to evolve and be able to respond to requirements which are themselves evolving. So, and very often I explain when I joined Eumetsat 25 years ago, the focus was really on operating satellites.
Yeah.
And today the focus is much more on data service and delivering data to users. Well, that's, there is a shift and an evolution in the way we present ourselves.
Yeah, and that's evolved both operationally on the meteorological side, but also through Copernicus. So maybe you could develop a little bit on the role you're playing in the space segment of Copernicus.
Yes. So we have a mandate which is related to weather and climate. Observation, space observation for monitoring the weather and the climate, and that's what we do. And when we started talking with the European Commission many years ago, Copernicus was still GMES at that time, we proposed to the European Commission to do things which are very complementary to what we do for our member states. So to bring this operational dimension in Copernicus, but in areas which are strongly related to the weather and the climate. And this is why the purpose of Eumetsat is to deal with the missions which are observing the ocean, the atmosphere, and which are contributing to the climate monitoring. And so to do that, it took a bit of time. So at the beginning of GMES at the time, we were not very present because it was still seen as an R&D project. But whenever we started in 2011 to have the GMS initial operational program, that's where Eumetsat came into the picture. So today our role is focused on operating a series of Sentinels. So we are operating today 2 Sentinel-3, so A and B, which are looking at the ocean, so ocean color, elevation, sea surface temperature. We are operating a model of the Sentinel-6, so the first Sentinel-6 6A. And we are also still paid by the European Commission to operate the JASON-3, which was the precursor mission of the Sentinel-6. And then we will very soon, and the first time we were involved in Copernicus, there was a big focus on the ocean with Sentinel-3 and Sentinel-6. In the years to come, we will continue, obviously, to work on the oceanographic part, but we'll deploy the atmospheric composition observation. So we will operate Sentinel-4 and 5, which are UV sonder, looking at the atmospheric composition. A particularity of these 2 Copernicus missions is that they are instruments which will be hosted on Eumetsat satellites. Yeah. So typically Sentinel-4 is an instrument which is developed by ESA in industry, paid for by ESA and the European Commission, but hosted on a Meteosat 3rd generation satellite. And so, and Sentinel-5, it is the same on a next generation of polar orbiting satellite. And this shows really the coherence and the complementarity between European Meteorological Program funded by Eumetsat member states and the Copernicus program. And we try to use this synergy in as many fields as possible. So for example, all the data acquisition or data dissemination that we do from Copernicus data are embedded in infrastructure that we use also for disseminating the meteorological data. So that's a bit on the space segment, so the type of Sentinel that you operate. Then there is also another big project that we have with the European Commission in the context of Copernicus, was that we operated from the beginning one of the data information and access systems, or one of the DIAS, which is WEKEO. And we took an approach which was a bit different, is that, again, as we do with the meteorological community, where we are strongly linked with our users, we wanted to develop this IAS with the users of the Copernicus data, so the people we are interfacing with, which are the services dealing with the marine monitoring service, the atmospheric composition, the climate service, and also the land service. So our partners in WEKEO are Mercator Océan, International, ECMWF, and the European Environmental Agency. So these are a bit the pillar of what we do in Copernicus. Interesting because a focus on the mission, different ways of cooperation. So we have a cooperation model where everything is paid by the European Commission, we just operate. We have a cooperation model where we host instruments for the European Commission and will then operate on their behalf. And then we have a third cooperation model, which is the model that we have for the Sentinel-6. It's a model where Eumetsat member states are also putting money into the program. So it's really a cooperation program between the European Commission, ESA, and Eumetsat. So it shows that we try to have flexible ways of approaching our cooperation with the European Commission and ESA and Copernicus to be the most efficient as we could, and at the end of the day, to deliver the best services to the Copernicus community.
There's a dimension of international cooperation on Sentinel-6 as well, isn't there, with the topics?
So Sentinel-6, clearly, but you have to remember that Sentinel-6 is a continuation of something which started many years. We celebrated the 30 years, by the way, this year of the launch of TOPEX Poseidon, which was originally a cooperation between France and the United States, so between NASA and CNES. Eumetsat became involved in this program when the third satellite of the series, which was called JASON-2, was launched. And at that time, it was a bit like meteorology. Meteorology was the first program. Meteosat was an ESA program, which was transferred into an operational agency at a later stage, Eumetsat. So for oceanography, we did the same from a NASA CNES cooperation. In JASON-2, the two operational agencies in Europe and in the US, so Eumetsat and NOAA, joined the program. And then the program was so successful that it contributed to requirements which were expressed in the context of Copernicus. And this is why after JASON-3, the next mission was a Sentinel-6 mission. And therefore, the two main partners of the Copernicus program, which are ESA and the European Commission, joined the partnership. So today it's 3 European, ESA, EC, Eumetsat, and 2 American, NASA and NOAA.
It's a good example of how I hope more industry can get involved in the program and in the CCMs, not necessarily in relation to Eumetsat, but also in relation to Eumetsat. I want to come on to industry opportunities and working with Eumetsat, but before that, or maybe as a way of getting there, you're an operational agency, but you do a lot of research. You're heavily looking to innovate in the space segment, but also in the ground segment. What's going on there that you can tell us about? What are the main thrusts of research activity?
To give you a good idea, or if people who are attending this conversation wants to have a good idea, I would really suggest you to go on our website and to download our recently approved strategy, which is called Destination 2030, because I think it gives a good idea of what we do and where we want to go. As I remember at the beginning, we are operational, so we have to deliver a service. And this is the most important. But while delivering the service, we should also innovate, and we shall not ignore that the world around us is evolving. But when we do this innovation and when we try to bring new things into the system, we shall make sure that we never interrupt the service. So we need to find a balance. And today we are clearly at this point in time. because we will in the next 5 years totally renew our observing infrastructure. So we will deploy new generations of meteorological satellites in geostationary orbit and in polar orbit. And these two, and an anecdote is that the first MTG I1 satellite left France, Fos-sur-Mer today on a ship to Kourou. So it's a special day in Eumetsat today because yesterday we gave the consent to ship to the satellite. So we are progressing toward the launch. It will be the first of a series, but in the next 5 to 6 years, we'll launch one new meteorological satellite per year, every year. And these satellites are very innovative. And there, of course, the European industry has been key because we will fly on these satellites very innovative instruments. We'll fly new instruments compared to the previous generation, and we'll fly some instruments which are world premiere in a context of operational agency. So, for example, the MTG satellite will have an infrared sounder, which is flown today only by China, but more on a demonstration basis. It will be the first time that an operational agency will fly this type of instrument. So it's transition from operations to innovation. And this is what is happening with our new program. But we are already also looking further, looking a bit what might happen in the years to come. And there, basically, we want to take benefits of what is happening on the market in two main areas. And this is clearly reflected in Destination 2030 because it's expressed as the new strategic objective for Eumetsat in the next 5 years. So we first want to take benefits of what is happening on the space segment side. And for this, we are looking at technology, new space, between brackets, I will explain, and commercial sector. Alors, technology, it's that we will propose to our member states in 2025 to have a follow-on program to the Earth Explorer mission of ESA, which is Aeolus. So Aeolus was really focused on meteorological applications, so looking at wind profile using a LiDAR technology. It was also a world premiere. After 4 years in orbit, scientists have demonstrated that Aeolus has a real positive contribution to, as an input to numerical weather prediction. And therefore, we want to propose innovation through technology by having an operational program with 2 recurrent satellites, 10 to 12 years of operation. And this will do it with ESA. And ESA will go with a proposal at its ministerial meeting at the end of the year. So it's innovation along technology. Then a second axe of innovation that we have is innovation through new space. And there, our new space is a bit of a buzzword. So I will explain what we want to do at Eumetsat is that we want to go with more flexible architecture. So today we have a big meteorological program with big satellite, and METOP-SG is 4.5 tons or something like this, and 7 or 8 instruments. We would like to complement these operations with opportunities which are offered by the new space business. And for this, again, in a cooperation that we have with ESA, ESA has developed a prototype satellite, which is called an Arctic weather satellite, which will carry one of the instruments of METOP-SG, so a microwave sonder, MHS, and we will make it smaller, so we'll reduce the number of channels. But again, in doing so, we have defined the reduced version of the instrument with the user. So we have tried to select the one which are the most interesting from a user perspective. We'll put it on a smaller platform, and we'll have a satellite in the order of 150 kilograms. Mm-hmm. And the idea of Eumetsat would be to deploy this satellite as a constellation, in constellation around the METOP-SG satellite. And they would complement, so the idea is to have a constellation of 6 satellites on 3 different orbits. And these orbits will fully complement the global observing system that we have today, which is filled by American, Chinese, and European satellites. And we basically share the orbits between these three, between China, US, and ourselves. And we will be complementary so that we deliver data which are unique, and again, which have a big impact on the applications, which are the assimilation in numerical weather prediction model. So this is second. And yeah, sorry.
Sorry, no. Would that be part of data sharing as well? You mentioned sharing the orbits with third parties, third countries. Yeah.
I cannot anticipate what the data policy will be, because we will decide this when first of all, if and when the programs are approved. And but I can tell you that in meteorology, the trend is really to go for open and shared data policy. And I will illustrate it in my third axe of innovation, which is a relationship with the private sector. So we have realized that for meteorological observation, we start having some private company which are offering data which are of good quality and therefore have positive impact on the job of the weather service. And therefore, 2 years ago, we discussed with our member states if there would be an interest for them that Eumetsat play the role of a data, procures data from the commercial sector on their behalf and distribute this data to the National Weather Service. And we have started a pilot project, and so we are today procuring radio occultation data from a private company. And a very interesting feature in implementing this service. So it was a long process, because first of all, in Eumetsat, we procure on best value for money. So we have to go to the market and we buy whatever is best value for money. This is very important. Second, we can procure if we demonstrate that what we procure deliver a real benefit to the member states. So before procuring, we had a long testing phase together with ESA on demonstrating that adding more radio occultation data in the models would improve the quality of the weather forecast. And once we were convinced of this, then our council authorized us to go to the market, release an ITT, and procure the data, again on the pilot phase. So it's a 3 years project, and it will end up mid-2024. What was very interesting to this, and coming back to your previous point, is that when discussing with the member states, we had to discuss the type of license that we would buy for this data. And we had a fixed budget, and it was very simple. So we would have we had a fixed amount of money to spend per year. And for that amount of money, we got a number of radio occultation. And of course, this number was higher if we would have procured the data for a use which would have been limited to our member states. And at that time, the member states of Eumetsat, so the council decided, no, in meteorology, we have this approach of global sharing of data. So we will procure the data with a license which authorizes us to distribute this data globally to any users. The end result is that we got less data, but we send a political message to the partners with whom we work, saying this would be the position of Europe. And very, very interestingly, the Americans were a precursor in this domain. So they were procuring data from the commercial sector ahead of us, a few years ahead of us, but not with the same licensing conditions. And last week, NOAA announced that they have placed a new, what they call the new delivery order for radio occultation data. And for the first time, they have placed this delivery order with a license which is equivalent to what we have. And it means that by doing so, Europe is procuring a data set to a commercial company and is authorized to redistribute with everybody. But I think that we have also helped the Americans in moving into that direction, and therefore our national weather services and our users in Europe will benefit from the procurement of the United States. So it's an interesting setup. And it means that Eumetsat in doing so is trying to see how the markets evolve, what could be the future way of deploying satellites. So it's continuity of operation with innovation. And this is an example of what we did for the space side, but I can tell you also what we do on the ground segment side, where we have also a lot of innovation.
Yeah, let's come on to that. But I was just interested in I mean, we've had a lot of discussions, years of discussions about the concept of anchor tenancy, and you know, the Commission are now looking to establish a system whereby they could find means to support new entrants into the business. Different models are possible. But one model, and perhaps the most obvious, is some form of commitment to buy data in the future if the satellite system is launched. I guess the occultation model did not follow that path, but would that be a possible path for Eumetsat in the future?
Difficult to answer. We had the discussion, so we were approached by some European companies proposing us to develop observing systems for us under the condition that we would guarantee that we would procure the data for them. And this today we cannot do, because as I have explained, before buying something from the market, we have first to demonstrate that it has a real value on what we do. So we need a priori to test the data, and we need also, this was a very interesting thing in setting up this pilot project. We have also to demonstrate that industry is capable of delivering with a type of operational requirement that we have. So I was giving a figure on the availability of our system. So we have to put this constraint on commercial company. And in this case, it was a success. It is a success. It is today. They have committed to deliver a number of radio occultation per day at Eumetsat, and the data are coming, are flowing, and we are constantly working with them to improve the service to the user. But to respond to your question, so playing the role of someone pre-funding or pre-financing an infrastructure is not something that we will do in the future in Eumetsat.
No.
But once an infrastructure is deployed and if it demonstrates benefits, then we could become an anchor client. Again, taking into account the specificities of a market like meteorology, where we have this basic principle of global data sharing, which has recently been reconfirmed in the context of the World Meteorological Organization. So the World Meteorological Organization went to its Congress last year to change the famous Resolution 40, and they approved the Resolution 1 on, but the principle, the first principle of this new resolution on data policy in the context of the World Meteorological Organization was to reaffirm the global and free exchange of data. So
yeah, no, I wasn't suggesting pre-funding. I understand that could be difficult, but some form of commitment to buy the data if it's proven. So at the end of the pilot phase, to say, if the pilot's a success, then yes, we want this data, and to establish mechanisms, and companies can look for other funding on the back of that promise, maybe even development funding through ESA.
It is clearly, so we are more or less at halfway through this pilot project, and we are already starting discussion with all member states on shall we continue? If we continue, what type of kind of resilient funding mechanism we shall put in Eumetsat to be able to play this contract. Today, for weather forecasting, we have only identified offer in the field of radio occultation, but there might be more in the future. We know that there will be more. It's not that there will be more in the future. And when we will plan our future observing infrastructure, it is clear that we'll have also to take into account what will be available on the market. But in doing so, again, we need to deliver best value for money. That means that offers from the markets will have to be competitive compared to some things that we might be able to do on our own.
I think that's understood. I guess there might be a question whether there's any not restrictions, but whether European companies could find favor. But I don't know if that's you're the European organization, so
it is clearly. This is clear in our procurement rule. We can only procure from companies which are based in which have their. It's not totally true. So when the expertise exists in Europe, we have to procure in Europe. In Europe, Europe being understood in Eumetsat within the 30 member states of Eumetsat. And it's by the convention we have to do it. So when we probe the market, we do it among our member states.
Okay.
Okay. This is why, for example, the offer is relatively limited today in Europe. There is much more, not much more. There is more offer in the United States, but we cannot procure from these companies.
Yeah. Well, we're actively trying to establish new mechanisms that would help European companies move forward. And the Commission it's a very strong line in the Commission at the moment to try to establish and use European procurement as a leverage to support European companies and competencies. So it's certainly a very strong activity. Let's talk about the ground segment or the data exploitation, perhaps. I think there are two programs which are relevant. Firstly, Copernicus and WEKEO, where you operate one of the 5 DIAS for other commercial DIAS. I think there are certain the DIAS program will continue, but there's been a bit of uncertainty about how it will continue, and that has left a lot of companies sort of unsure as to whether they could commit to using DIAS. What's your perspective on the DIAS broadly?
I will speak only about what I know, so what Eumetsat is doing.
Fair enough.
I will not comment on the rest. But
I might challenge you a bit, but yeah.
On what Eumetsat is doing, so typically it is clear that we are operating WEKEO, again, not alone, with our partner of Mercator, ECMWF, and the European Environmental Agency. And WEKEO is operated, of course, through a contract which is placed with industry. And if you look at the Eumetsat website where we publish our ITT, you will see that there is an ITT open at the moment on the continuation of WEKEO. So if anyone is interested to respond, maybe I can explain later on how you can access to all this information for the company. But if you connect on the website, there is an ITT open for WEKEO. We have for WEKEO the guarantee that it will be funded by the European Commission, at least until the end of this MFF. So when we negotiated our contribution agreement with the European Commission for the period 2021 to 2028, we explained that we would use WEKEO as part of our operational ground segment for making the Copernicus data available to users. And we did this in a coherent manner with ECMWF, EA, and Mercator Océan International. And therefore, in the funding which is planned as part of the contribution agreement of these 4 entities, there is a funding for WEKEO. So on our side, WEKEO is here today, but will still be there in 2028. With evolution, and this is precisely the purpose of the ITT, which is open at the moment.
Okay. I'll leave it to others to dig a bit deeper there if they wish. I think it clearly raises a lot of further questions, but
maybe your question was also related to innovation in the field of ground segment, and WEKEO is an example. But WEKEO was built on services that we had developed ourselves for our own users. So we had a series of Eumetsat big data services with data on the cloud, with capacity to do hosted processing by our member states on our cloud, these type of things. So, and we reuse some building blocks and some concept of these services developed for Eumetsat to develop WEKEO. And we are very active in this field. Because together with the European Center, we are also developing a European weather cloud. So where the idea there is to have a joint cloud belonging to the meteorological community where all meteorological data could be made accessible, so satellite observation, but also output of models from ECMWF and whatever the member states would like to put on this cloud. So it's another avenue. And then, as you might know, we are also one of the partners involved in the Destination Earth program of the European Commission. But again, in this type of program, we do we try to do our core business, and our core business, as I've explained at the very beginning, is to make sure that data are reaching the user. So typically our role in Destination Earth is not at all on the modeling part, or it's really the part which is nearly invisible. It's the data lake. It's to make sure that the data will circulate, all the data which are needed by the famous digital twins, which are the interface. This is what the people will see. They will see the output of the twins, but to run the twins, they will need lots of data. The job of Eumetsat is to make sure that these data are accessible and getting to the entities doing the models. Again, right format, right timeliness, right level of quality.
Yeah, I mean, industries, looking to try to understand destination, destiny, and how best to get involved, how they can get involved, either in providing services. You mentioned the cloud services, but I think companies would also like to be delivering sort of information services if possible, but more perhaps even more so how they can be involved in exploiting the investment that's being made in developing this new capability, and applying that into commercial markets. How do you see that? You see a relationship with Eumetsat? Is it a relationship more with ECMWF? How would you portray that?
As I've explained, so we are really one of the building blocks of Destination Earth. We will build this building block with industry. So we have 3 big ITTs which are planned. One is already done and dusted. So we have just signed a contract to support us in the elaboration of this data lake. But there are 2 ITTs which are either being issued. One should be issued now and one will be released very soon. So we work with industry. And this is a message that I want to pass to you, is that 80% of the budget of Eumetsat is contracted. So for 80% of the budget that we have, we go for procurement in open competition on the European market. So this is important to know. So I'm not with this responding to your question, but I explained the type of interaction that companies might have with Eumetsat in the context of Destination Earth, but it remains really the basics of providing storing capacities, computing capacities, expertise on building these data lakes. Your question was more on the applications and interface, and on this, again, I would really encourage by your members to go talk to the European Commission, talk to the European Center for Medium Range Forecasting, which are the entities who will be the interface with potential users of the twins, and voilà. Yeah. That's
and again, I mean, sort of a core message we've given for some time is to communicate with industry what the plans are, what's happening, so that industry can be prepared to support you in the best way possible, and give you the best offers possible.
But on this, what I can make a bit of advertisement to what we do in Eumetsat. So in Eumetsat, we have a relationship with industry is relatively simple for us. We have an online system which is called Eumits, so EUMITS, that you will find if you go on our website. And by registering to Eumits, you will receive all information, and not only tenders. So, for example, when we do tenders, like the one we have just done for Destination Earth, I can take the example of the first ITT we did for Destination Earth. We also organize industry information days, and I can tell you it's really well attended. So we have always several hundreds of people participating from many companies, and it helps us before the official tendering period is open to share information with industry of what we expect, so to shape a bit the procurement that we want to do, and then we enter in the phase of competition. But being being registered on EUMETS will give you a lot of information on what we do with industry and how. And then another thing which has to be known by companies is that we can always, at the request of a member state, organize information days for specific countries.
Mm-hmm.
And each Eumetsat member state has an industrial focal point in each country. And by discussing with your national focal point in Eumetsat, you can ask to have dedicated presentation on how to interact with industry, types of ITT, procurement rules in Eumetsat. And we have a standard presentation and we do it regularly. Yes, it's really a 3 hours workshop that you can run. And now we do it even online, so it's even easier, and it helps us building this relationship with industry. It's very important for us to have this interaction, but again, you will realize that we are not on the really downstream. We are relatively upstream. So we are observation and distribution of observation towards users.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So message to everyone, and to make sure you're registered on EUMETS, and if you want to have
free of charge, so do not hesitate.
I would hope so for an open data policy.
It's a public service.
Exactly, yeah. But also to get in contact with your local technical representatives, which I guess are in the Met offices, the national Met offices. And
yes, I'm pretty sure that there is a list which is available online, and if not, you can then always contact us and we'll tell you, okay, for France, the national focal point, the industrial focal point for France is that person, and just ask for it.
That's great. So
it's important. We cannot promise your return, but we can promise to be proactive in establishing relationship with industry in all our member states. That's for sure.
Yeah. It could be interesting to talk about procurement, but there's a question in the chat around data policy, which is another very interesting chat. Arvin, do you want to join the conversation?
Sure. Hi, Paul. So,
Hi.
Yeah, it was more. Yeah, the data policy is, I think, a second discussion. I think more what I was, asking was, I think, the conversation around anchor tenancy and how that has evolved in the satellite imaging world. And I think today the sector has reached a point where, we even see, even if the company does not have assets in orbit, you have, whether it's NOAA or NRO or in Europe. Europe, it has not happened as much, but in the US, the sector has reached to a point. So I'm wondering, what can we do to let that happen? Because what I feel like is I've spoken to at least 3 companies that have ideas for different sorts of instruments to fill data gaps, both in Europe and around the world. Whether it's in passive microwave or, even radio occultation from other companies in Europe. So I'm wondering, what are things that we can do as a community to incentivize them, and also, help them actually get investments, because getting private funding is getting pretty hard, especially, it's increasing in the space industry overall, but then if you look at it from a meteorological or commercial weather satellite company point of view, it hasn't been that easy, because not many companies have actually raised, and I know of quite a few that have attempted. And because that anchor customer, is not available, it's also hard for them. So I'm just like, how do we solve that problem? Because we do need to kind of push the frontier with respect to observation. So I'm wondering, what could be that stepping stone to getting there?
Good question, and I can try to respond, but then from a personal perspective and not from a Eumetsat perspective, because again, our job is not. We don't have a mandate of developing industry or developing the market. We have a mandate of assessing what is available from the market to deliver the best possible service at the best possible cost to our member states. Okay. So clearly we are not in the situation of the United States, and it is clear that when we speak with our colleagues from NOAA, they are under totally different, into a totally different environment. So to give you what has happened in the case of the radio occultation is that there were a series of projects which were developed in the context of ESA, which has a mandate to do this. ESA has a mandate to do innovation, has a mandate to promote excellence in European industry. And through a transition and through a number of projects of ESA, we were able to demonstrate that what was flying was delivering good value for numerical weather prediction. And therefore, we were in a position, us as a client, to go to the market and say, voilà. I agree. It's less simple than in the US, where you can clap your fingers and get the money you need to do the upfront investment. It's a bit.
So I'm wondering perhaps if there is a way to kind of have the three organizations collaborate, because ESA as the, let's say, the technology part, and then Eumetsat from an operational data validation point of view, and then ECMWF on a data impact point of view. Can we have like a system where all three can collaborate? And I know it's complicated, but then I'm just trying to see what would be the scenario, what would the best case situation looks like for those startups that are trying to see what would be the best way possible. So I'm just wondering if that would be a solution where all three kind of.
But this is what we do. This is what we do. But again, with the constraint that I have explained. But alors, I will come back to the two examples of Sterna, the microwave, microsatellite, and Aeolus. So clearly, Aeolus will not do it with a startup. Who is building these instruments. So it's clearly not a startup, but it is the same model. So it is a model of a development which has been funded by an agency which is a mandate for doing this, and which has developed the best instrument we can with the best possible industry. And then we, as users, during the 4 years of the lifetime of the satellite, we assess the value. We are doing socioeconomic benefit studies to show what such a program would bring to Europe. And then we are, after ESA, coming with something which is a longer term perspective, which has more satellites. Voilà. And we do it in the context of Aeolus with a big one, between brackets. What we are trying to do with Sterna is already reaching companies which are of a smaller size, because we are not, as I said, we are talking of a satellite of 150 kilograms. And so this is at least this is one way in Europe to do things. And I recognize with you that for a startup which are access to market should be very fast. It's not easy, because it's clearly a way which takes several steps, and it takes time between turning an idea funded by ESA into something operational in an organization like Eumetsat. On the other hand, I can observe, when I read the Agenda 2025 of the DG of ESA, when I see what they do in terms of relationship with industry, when I see the type of proposals they put on the table for the ministerial at the end of the year, that ESA is trying to have mechanism which will accelerate the cycle on their side. So operational organization like Eumetsat might then be faster in picking up opportunities if these opportunities arose. So that's a bit the way we work.
Okay, makes sense.
Yeah.
And then, because I see in your question, there is a question on the data policy. But this is something different. This is a different issue. Even in the United States, where they are promoting the use and the relationship between public institutions like NOAA and the US commercial sector. I have, because I'm writing a report on this at the moment. So I have the quote of a former deputy assistant secretary of NOAA in the US Congress, saying for each dollar we spend in an observing system, we get $3 of benefits through the sharing of data. Because they get all the data from Europe, they got the data from Japan, they got the data. And it is higher in Europe, because on top of what the Americans get, we get on also the Chinese data. So you see, it's not obvious. So it's a bit of a particular market.
Yeah, it is a very specific market, and
it's very specific.
The biggest challenge is there are still data gaps around the world, and we are only pushing at it from one direction, which is the the public sector point of view, and the private sector has just started to come in. And
but
how do we encourage more?
But this is why we are active. I think the fact that our member states had a discussion. Look, 5 years ago, it would have been totally odd to tell our member states, we will buy data for you. We had this discussion. We looked at it from a legal perspective, saying, does it fit within the Eumetsat Convention? Does it fit with the mandate that we are given? When they considered that it was adequate and covered by the convention of Eumetsat, then we have the long discussion. And so it means that we are not, we are trying to also be proactive there. And today I can tell you, the service that we operate is delivering value for money to our member states by a direct procurement from the private sector.
And this is changing in Eumetsat, and I think it's also going to be changing in the Copernicus program. I will think we'll see more initiatives and more opportunities emerging there. Tony Sefton. Hi, Tony.
Hi, Jeff. Hi, Paul. Yeah, just a general question for you, Paul, about use of artificial intelligence and machine learning, and how it's being applied or is intended to be applied to all the metadata that you now have. I mean, I could think of a few possible examples, but I'm sure there are many more. So perhaps, nowcasting of localized thunderstorms, developments of hurricanes, analysis of all the historical data that you have for climate change predictions. So yeah, just to get some feeling as to how you're already, or at least planning to use AI.
It will be. It's really a good question. It is very timely. My response is that it will be key. We cannot ignore this, and we'll have to be very proactive in doing this. Last week, we had our Eumetsat Satellite User Conference in Brussels, and I can tell you that it was amazing to see the number of presentations we had on AI and machine learning. And the reason for this is that if you compare MTG that we launch at the end of the year with MSG, you will get 50 times more data. You multiply by the number of satellites, and you do the same for MetopSG. So you will see that the global NWP center, it will be exponential, the type of data they will get. And then they will only be able to use a fraction of this data. And therefore, to identify the best data, to identify the ones which will have a real impact on the forecast, technologies like AI and machine learning will be absolutely key. And this is why, for example, if you look at when the European Center approved its last strategy, it was 1 or 2 years ago, together with the strategy, they also approved an AI and machine learning roadmap. And our council also approved an AI and machine learning roadmap for Eumetsat. But again, the application will be different because ECMWF will use AI and machine learning for supporting the forecast. We might use it in a Eumetsat context for already identifying best information to send to the users. But we are working on it, yeah. And it will be key. It will be key because with this amount of data, which is exponential, we will have to use these technologies. Yeah.
Okay.
Well, when we were preparing, you talked about a dedicated Horizon Europe action. Maybe would artificial intelligence be part of that? It would seem an obvious theme. Tell us a bit more about what you're looking for there.
I know what we are looking. It was very funny. So we went to DG RTD when they were building Horizon Europe to explain that European member states, if not all EU member states, would deploy these new generation of satellites, producing more than 50 times more data than what we deliver today, which are innovative, some, as I said, world premiere. And therefore, to take the benefit of this data, there will be an investment in science and research, which is absolutely huge. And so we have convinced the DG RTD to have specific calls in Horizon Europe, focusing on the use of the data which will be provided by the new Meteosat satellite, by the new METOP second generation satellite, and also by instrument of Copernicus, which will be flown on this satellite. And the idea is it's the same in Eumetsat. In Eumetsat, we have our science division. It's 150 PhD working on making the best possible algorithm to get the best possible output of the data. And we believe that by giving resource to the research community in Europe to play with this new data will really help in being faster in getting more benefits. And of course, again, this is where coming back to the idea of the data policy, the fact that this data will be distributed free of charge and accessible to anyone is very, very important. And this was attractive. So when we finished the meeting with Mr. Paquet, he told us, you are one of the rare organizations who came here to offer me something and not to ask money. And say, we don't ask money for us. We ask you to put money in the system so that the research community at large in Europe, the people dealing with issue of course, extreme weather events, climate monitoring, oceanography, gets money to play with the data that MTG, Meteosat second generation, and the Sentinels will deliver and get the best out of this data as quickly as we can.
And when will this be like to happen? When will the calls be open?
That's a very good question. It's still not there because we haven't launched the satellite. So the data are not flowing.
Okay.
The data are not flowing there. But
yeah, but we need a lead time. Yeah.
It is in the work program, and the call I think is planned for next year call. It means the time to negotiate the contract for project which will start in 2024, and at that time MTG will be operationally delivering data. So
and Eumetsat role in that, help to define the call, but would you participate in?
No. There are many projects that we do with the European Commission where we support. R&D is a clear example. There will be not a single euro from Horizon Europe coming to Eumetsat. This is clear, but it might go to the Met Service to our member states, or to research, or to academia, which will be dealing with our data. So what we do with the European Commission is that we really work with them on formulating the calls, identifying the areas and the priorities in Horizon Europe where there could be an interest, and building the calls together with them. But it's a cooperation, and again, I want to be very clear, we will not bid for Horizon Europe calls. We will not compete with our member states.
Or be part of bids.
If we are part of bids, when we are part of bids in Horizon Europe or Horizon 2020 project, is more as partner. We are not seeking for funding. When we are part of bids, it's really to support consortia with a particular expertise on data access, on data formats, or these type of things. Or we are in steering committees of projects. But it's clearly not the top priority of Eumetsat to. And we don't have this mandate either of doing. We do research from ourselves. We have a very strong science part in Eumetsat, but it's not an objective of the organization to collect money for doing research.
No, clear. So Bente, you wish to ask about data lakes and data spaces.
Yeah.
Hey Bente.
Hi, nice to see you.
Long time no see. Yeah.
Absolutely. Finally, I made it to one of the cafes. Yes, so for those of you who don't know me, particularly Paul, I don't think you know me. I'm Norwegian, and I'm one of the partners in a project called ILIA, the digital twin of the ocean. So you mentioned digital twins. Now, we have a little bit of different perspective or approach than the Mercator Ocean International. We are more focused on the near user, end users, like harbor management of harbors, aquaculture, etc. Now, we are building a federated system and try to, well, not only try, we are making the system so that we can contribute to a data space. I know you are talking about data lakes. Now, how do you, and Destiny we are talking about data space in order for all the systems to be able to work together. How do you, what are your thoughts on that? How do you plan to accommodate that perspective?
I will give you a very, very high level response because I'm clearly not a specialist. So I will tell you what are the policy principles around. I would be very pleased just to take your question and to put you in contact with the technicians who will do and implement the data lakes, because then you can have a real exchange and a real discussion. But as we have done, for example, for Copernicus, and as we are doing for meteorology, the idea is to make sure that several data sources could talk to each other. We are also in a federated mode. Clearly, we are not bringing everything in the same place. We are in a federated mode. We are trying to access data centers which are spread. And what we'll do in Destination Earth for the pilot twins, which is the scope of the initial project started by DG Connect. They will define their requirements in terms of data. Our job will be to make sure that these data, we go to the right data centers, we make sure that these data are accessible in a transparent way and fulfilling all the requirements from the entities who will run the twins. So the idea is to use an architecture which is as open as possible. And again, this is what we do for meteorological data. This is what we'll do. The European Weather Cloud is another example. We are not going to put all the data in one cloud. We are making sure that ECMWF data center speaks to Eumetsat data center, speaks with the Met Office and with the Meteo France and the DWD data center, so that the Slovenian Met service can get access through all this data in a very simple way. Voila, this is a concept. Should you be interested to have an in-depth, more technical discussion, I'm really pleased to, through Geoff, you can establish the contact with me, and I will put you in contact with the team who is doing this on a daily basis.
Yeah, please, that will be very useful.
Okay, so drop us a mail afterwards, Bente, and we can act on that. Okay, thanks. Paul, we've got to 5 o'clock. It's been a really interesting discussion. There are a number of topics I'd like to develop further, as always, but we've run out of time, at least for the formal part of the meeting. The EOcafe is very informal, but we always say at the end that we end the formal part, and anyone who wants to hang around, just open microphones and chat. They're very welcome. So, Paul, I don't know if you'll stay with us or you need to head off, but you're very welcome either way. Let me thank you on behalf of everyone here for talking about the plans at Eumetsat, talking about these the industrial participation, and I think you've opened a number of very interesting lines to talk further. And I imagine there will be not just Bente contacting you, but others as well.
Yeah,
so,
feel free. I think behind me you saw our website. There is plenty of information, including, I think, my email address. So feel free to be in contact, and anyone who wants to be in contact through Geoff, or no problem. But thank you for the invitation, and it's always good to have such an informal discussion with a good audience. Thank you.
It was a real pleasure. Thank you, Paul. So next time, in 2 weeks' time, the 13th of October, we're talking about development finance and how to work more closely with the World Bank, or the IFIs, particularly the World Bank and the Asian Development Bank. So I'll be joined by Alex Strune and Paolo Manunta, who will be talking about that. Some interesting time differences there, so hopefully everyone will be with us. So that's in 2 weeks' time at 4 o'clock as usual on the second Thursday, and that's it for now. So please feel free now. We turn the recording off, and anyone who wants to talk, please feel free just to do so. Thanks.